again.
All right, folks. This is Hellcrex, Rusty, and I'm with Palmer from Heresy Productions tonight. And love it when something pops up on your screen that you can't see what you're doing. All right, so what we're going to do is talk about a few things tonight. This is what, episode 5 now? Right? At 5?
Well, all right. Sorry about that. I was having a bit of a technical difficulty as I was trying to moderate the chat comments. I was hearing you twice.
Oh, did you have the live stream on?
Yeah, because I'm just trying to follow the chat. So sorry about that. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us once again. I've got that taken care of.
Once again. Bring over my 25 Mike ammo can for my footrest.
Yeah, there you go.
Benefits of a military career. All right. It's been a couple weeks. It's been kind of interesting for the last couple of weeks. A lot of people don't know it. I was out of state for 5 days doing stuff. And then got back into the hobby business again, full bore. And as you can probably notice if you watch any of my videos that, yeah, the orcs have come back out again.
I have noticed. They came out awesome.
Yeah, I've just been wanting to do something with them. It's been, when you're sitting there having probably about 5,000-6,000 points of orcs, and they're just sitting in a box. It's like, hey, I could spend the next couple of years painting stuff. But
you got to start on them last fall.
Yeah, I had a big start on them. Then, as you know, we're slackers in life. I don't paint. I never paint. That's my problem. I don't understand. I could just never pick up a brush. I have no motivation at all.
Yeah, now I know you're being sarcastic. After looking at your paint desk.
It's actually, the paint desk has been kind of clearing out a little bit. It's gotten cluttered a little bit because the stuff that's done, I haven't put it away yet. My orcs are still sitting right here. What's been going on for the last week?
There you go.
There's Mr. Orc. That's my war boss. Here, let me do this to myself. Here. That's my war boss. If you haven't watched my videos, in case you're not a subscriber to me, but one of Palmer's, that's my new Gazgul. And I'll bring up the Gazgul, the wimp, as I like to call him. Like, here's the GW one. And then you look at the Cromlech one. Which one's bigger?
Well, everybody that goes second gets a chance to make it bigger, right?
Yeah. He who goes last gets the biggest fish story.
That's right. So, did you get a chance to, depending on what you were doing, I'm guessing you probably didn't get a chance, but did you get a chance to drop in anywhere, like when you were away for 5 days since you were traveling, or no, like into stores far away or something?
Not the kind of stores that you would think I would stop into. ATVs, snowmobiles, motorcycles. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I was doing. As I'm wearing my, this was 2006. The Iron Man.
Oh, okay.
I used to race ATVs back.
Okay. So did you pick one of those up? You pick one up?
I wanted to. There was a lot of in northern Minnesota. They had a couple feet of snow, 3 feet of snow still on the ground. So it was more thinking about sleds.
Yeah. So, did you think about how many miniatures you could buy if you didn't buy that ATV?
Well,
how much that was worth in miniatures?
Well, one good sled's worth about one starter box from Games Workshop. you know.
And an ATV is probably like 2 Forge World Titans.
Yeah, about that. It was like, okay, I can buy the ATV or I can buy the Warlord Titan.
How fast do you think? Do you think that it could, if you set that built Forge World Titan on the ground, do you think that that tire on the ATV could roll over it?
Oh yeah.
You don't think it would stop it with its, projection of its machine spirit?
And if it got in the way, there's always the winch on the front. I just throw it on a tree and winch over top of it. It's like, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a cool story. If there was one time when I was, this was at the Ironman, and we had this crossing this river, right? And it was a log jam, and vehicles, ATVs are trying to get through this narrow passageway, and it was this embankment that was like that, just practically vertical. And I watched this guy on this sport quad just go, ring, 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 boom, boom. I'm like, how in the heck did he do that? And he goes, and he's gone. Everybody else is like, get this stuck guy out of our way. And then next thing you know, you got these pro racers of the Alpha class are like, vroom. And they said, all right, new lane made. We're going straight up.
Awesome. So,
we talked about this a couple weeks ago.
Oh yeah, I love the black. The black trim is new, right?
Yes, I put the black trim.
Sharp.
And
that is sharp looking, Rusty. I like that.
Now the question that I have, if anybody watches the video, I'm trying to figure out what to do with this. Leave it white or make it yellow. I'm not sure yet.
Well, would it depend on like who it's carrying, like the level of the officer and like how decorative you want it, or like would that be like determinant?
It's just a sloop, so it'll be a small little thing. So now you can see I got the greens in there, but
nice.
The light really doesn't show, but this right here, this is green.
Yep. Oh, I can see
it. And that's green. It doesn't really show. It looks kind of black in the lighting, but
so from here I can, maybe it's because I also saw it earlier, but I could tell that it's green and different from the black trim. It definitely looks like a dark green. That's nice.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, that's the other thing I've been working on. Yeah, there might be some blood and plunder that's going to get done here in the next month.
That's awesome. I'm interested in hearing about your take on that more. Like once you have that finished and you're playing some games, I have actually, like I mentioned on a recent update, I've not been painting much. Now, initially, I kind of was like getting a little down about it, like not overly, but one of the ways I keep going with painting, and I know we're going to have topics tonight, and I'm not going to go into that, but I just find that I always like to be on a schedule, and if I'm on a schedule and I'm not doing what I've set out to do, then I feel like something's wrong. And like in order to keep going, I need to actually get right back on track. But as I mentioned in my recent video, I kind of recognize that one of the big reasons why I've not been painting a lot recently is I've been playing a lot more than I usually do. And I've been playing games I've never played before. And so I'm actually taking the miniatures that I've painted either this year or in the past for Saga and for Mordheim, and playing all these new games, like the new edition of Saga, playing Mordheim, playing Savage Core. And so because I've played like 3 new games within a month, that has really affected my ability to set aside time to paint. It's really infringed upon it and made me just staring at books more, reading rules, thinking about like the games, and then also playing the games themselves, right? And so that's kind of been me. Like I've just taken and I've been doing a little bit of hobby projects, like I showed with the storage solution, and literally, like in order to do that, I've been driving over the city to different places to buy like magnetic sheeting and washers and like all this stuff. And that's been taking up time as well. Like literally just driving around and getting stuff and ordering stuff. But yeah, I think that after this weekend, I'll be positioned to be painting a lot more again, and I'll have had some of those games under my belt, and there won't be as much gaming crammed together, which, you know, I kind of like the fact that I got to get a few games in a short period of time. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, whenever you get you finally, you've been painting all these miniatures for the last, couple months now for your, what's the one game that you have that you just had that
Savage Court.
Yeah, Savage Court. Yeah. That's it. And you finally got a game or two of that in, and it's just like, hey, we finally got something going on.
Exactly. It's true. And terrain too, right? Like terrain takes, I always say, like, you know, building the table, as much as it's hard to get all those miniatures painted, if you're starting from scratch, building the table is a huge hurdle. Mm-hmm. Not only from, it can be price. I mean, you can do it cheaper, but it can be a big hurdle to get those games started.
Yeah, I have a project that's sitting on the back burner in arm's reach, right over there. That I was talking with my brother, and we've been wanting to play, get our battleground or battle group game going.
Yeah,
and he was with, talking with them, and he bought his miniatures before he really read the rule books and stuff. And the interesting thing is about Battleground or Battle Group is that you don't need a lot of miniatures to play small games.
Yeah.
And him and his son, they were like, well, we really like the Russians and we're into the Russians and we really want Russians. And they went out and bought 5 KV2s.
Oh.
So they have 5 15 mil KV2s. And then they looked at the rules, and it's like unique. You can only have one.
That's a bummer.
To quote the Highlander movie, there can be only one. And he was like, oh, I got 4 more. What am I going to do with them? I was like,
you got to recruit 4 more people to play.
Don't worry about it. It's like, I have terrain. If I ever get off my butt and finish it, we can do Stalingrad.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a whole bunch of rubble type buildings and stuff, and I want to put them all together and make little. It's like here's the boards for them. What I want to do is like little train squares.
Yeah.
Mount them on here, and then take mud, plaster mud that you use for sheetrock, and put it on there and put stick terrain and all kinds of stuff into it.
Right.
And that's my goal, is to make a whole bunch of terrain that I can just put down and then just start adding to it. And
yeah, that's a good idea. Now, was that one 15 mil? It's right. It's 15, right? That's what I thought. That's the one you're talking about, that you've been doing all that. So he could use those for Flames of War, which allows for more like at a time, right? Or no?
Yeah, I believe Flames of War you can have. I think it's 2 to 5. I think in a platoon.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking, like, since you guys are playing Flames of War, some of your friends I know, like, you can easily just translate to that too, right?
Yeah. And I told him that, and he's like, well, I really rather play the battle group. It's like, we can play Flames of War, but he doesn't really, as we like to call it, Flames of War is Warhammer 40K in World War II.
Yeah. Well, it is. I noticed, I've never played it, but I did notice, I've read some of the rules, and it is, I know a lot of people that love it, but it is sort of like an I go, you go system, right?
Yeah.
Is that why you define it that way the most, or?
In a way, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because I did notice that. I got a free rule book years ago at my local game store. I was kind of like looking around the Flames of War section, and I guess somebody had detailed the game store and like just gave out a bunch of free rule books when they updated the rules. And they just handed me like a good size rule book. I mean, it's only like one of these sizes. But it's like
when they went from 2nd edition to 3rd edition, they started giving out free rule books just to get people still playing the game, and it was a big change from second to third edition, just like there's a big change kind of like from third to fourth edition.
Yeah. So yeah, so much of we're gonna, like, this could be like one of our topics, but so much of these games are visual. Like, I just that I found when I even looked at Flames of War the first time, I was like, this just looks so cool. Like, I was just like looking at all the buildings, and like I'd never played World War II at that point, and I was just looking at like the tanks going across the field, and like I was so used to playing Warhammer at that time, and I was like, oh, a war game, but like a different setting, It's like not, like, as much as I liked 40K, I just was like amazed at the idea of playing it that way. And so even though it's like an I-Go, you-Go system, like it looked really good.
Yeah, that's one nice thing about the Battlefront system. They have their miniatures, and what I like about 15 mil is that you can have a lot of these little guys on the table, and you can create battalions and regiments facing off against each other. It just depends on how much space you want or have, and you're able to do it pretty simple. Like, unlike if you're playing bolt action, and bolt action is a pretty decent system too, but it also, I guess one thing I really like about bolt action, which is you could do it with Flames of War, is that how they use the dice mechanic where you reach into the bag and pull out. It's like, oh, it sucks to be you, I get to go again.
Yeah.
And that's the one nice thing I do like about it. It's kind of the mystery that bolt action does, is that you're able to, it feels like you're not just like,
yeah.
Okay, you done yet? Oh, you're done killing me?
Yeah.
That's the worst thing about any game I hate, is like, you go, I go.
Yeah.
Is where you just sit there and it's like, okay, just tell me when you're done shooting at me. And one thing about 40K is that at least you get, if you have a chance to throw a saving throw every once in a while.
Yeah.
Kind of active.
Right.
But
that's true.
That's one nice thing about bolt action, is you sit there. All right. It's like, I'm waiting. It's like, that next die that comes out might be mine, and I get to do something.
Yeah, that's true. And I've heard, like, I've played bolt action. I know that game, and I like it for that reason. And there can be a semblance of coordination of your units. I mean, like, even though it is sort of an I-Go, you-Go, and sometimes it's an I-Go, I-Go, or a you-Go, you-Go, you still can run certain things up a certain side of the board, and like you can have that semblance of coordination even within the randomness. At least I felt that way. But at the same time, Chain of Command, which I've not played, the Two Fat Lardies game, some of the folks that like that game, they like it because you can get, I think, more of a feeling of coordination, among your units. And so, and in that game, there is actually random turns, and there are, I believe, like Sharp's Practice, elements of it's either cards, isn't it cards, just like Sharp's Practice, that you put down? Because then you do have in Sharp's Practice like the random element of the card that basically stops the round at any time, and you have the ability to do things and coordinate within it. I think similar. I think like some of the engine is similar to Sharp's Practice, as I remember. I've never played it, as I said, but there seemed to be that element. And so there's a strategic component, there's a random component, and then there's also a way of coordinating that some people like. And so it's interesting. But I don't think I've ever had a bolt action game where I didn't find it fun. That's kind of what it comes down to me. It's similar to Saga. I always seem to find Saga fun, no matter what.
And one thing about bolt action I like too is that you can pin things down and just shut them down. And which is kind of the feel is like, if you ever been in infantry or even armor, and you're laying down suppressive fire, and you're keeping their heads down, so they're not looking at what's going on, because if they stick their head up, you're done.
Yeah.
And so you're just laying down enough fire so your other units can maneuver around. And that's kind of like how it feels to me, is that you're trying to keep somebody pinned to the ground, and then I can maneuver on you and get flanks on you, and then go over top the objective or whatever it may be.
Right.
And there's a lot of other game systems out there that are similar to that give that feel. But we talked about it. Battleground from Easy 8 from way back in the 90s. That's another one that feels kind of the same way. And if you look up in the corner right there, that's Stellar Conflicts. That's a similar game.
Is there a picture of it in a frame?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought maybe you pointed the wrong spot, but it is. Okay.
Yes. That's the cover. That's the cover art from the game.
Yeah.
That was
cool. And then the Horns are the award you got for best in class at the Mordheim tournament.
Best in shot, right there. Best in shot.
Best in shot.
500 yards.
Semi-automatic.
No, bolt action, actually. Oh, yeah. Which kind of brings us up one of our topics we have tonight, which is, since we're talking about game companies, is miniature companies that have their own have their own rules and miniatures, and companies that just have a rule book, which then you can grab any type of miniatures around and fill them out. And since we've been sort of talking about all these different companies.
Yeah. Well, and even just like the two extremes to me, like when I was thinking about this, was like miniature companies that are focused on designing miniatures, and then rules companies for miniatures games that are focused on designing rules for miniatures. So it's like the rules versus the miniatures. Like you have some companies that focus primarily on developing rule sets. Studio Tomahawk would be an example. They don't produce miniatures at all. Then you have some companies that produce miniatures that don't produce rules at all. And I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I know I could tell you that, well, there are a lot of small companies that are casting companies that either have sculptors and casting facilities. That's all they do, is they just produce miniatures. And then there are companies that have produced miniatures but no rules, and in some cases it changes. But like Gripping Beast, I know, has Sword Point now for Saga, but I believe there was a time when they just produced and sold miniatures. And so there would be an example at that time of just a company that did miniatures, but they've branched out and now have rule sets, at least one that I know of. And so then you have companies like that have spanned it all to some degree. Like you have Games Workshop, which I think throughout its history has developed capabilities for both. And would be, you know, people would be looking to them for rules. People would be looking to them for miniatures. And so I find it an interesting topic, because I think overall I was wanting the discussion to kind of be like, what have you noticed among the games that you play from these companies, the differences between them when they have more of like a rule focus versus started out or have more of a miniatures focus? How do you find the games? Like, do you have any, like, within the companies that you play of those games? And then I do think, though, that there's an aspect to this where many of these companies start out with a primary focus of one of the or the other, but then get into the other. So, like, they start as a rule company, but then they get into the miniatures a bit to supplement that side and to support their rules. And then there are miniature companies that clearly, after making miniatures, will develop a rule set to support that line of miniatures that they want to sell. But it's interesting because you can almost wonder, like, are sometimes those rule sets a little premature, like when they're just sort of like just trying to get a rule set out, like, you know, for the miniatures, or are they sometimes awesome, you know, depending on the company? with the rules companies, do they actually sometimes get like a, go a little less so on the quality of the miniatures? You know what I mean? Like just to get something in there, to be able to support that rule set that they want to do. Or in many cases, you might have companies that actually will buy a company to bring under their umbrella to make that happen, because maybe they don't have the expertise, and it's just easier to actually buy a division to do that. And sometimes you might even have retailers, and this is getting off the subject, that might do that, where they'll actually buy a line of miniatures or a rule set, and they started out as just a gaming retailer, mostly distribution, like of products and things. And so, like it's kind of a broad topic, but I guess at the end of the day, like I would pose to you, like in the discussion, like first maybe, like you play a lot of games, Rusty, and you've seen a lot of companies. Do you have in your mind like this idea where some of them you just really like, they were primarily a miniature company and like you were focused on the miniatures, and like it was like, oh, we got like a rule set, and that affected the way you experience the game, versus a company where you're like, they produce really cool rules, and that may, like the focus is on the rules, and so maybe the game has a certain feel to it that way. And then they kind of later like kind of got into the miniatures part. I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts? Or is that just way too confusing the way I presented it?
No, it's not confusing. It's just there's two different camps. Is that you can see it. Let's just put on the one spectrum, we have Games Workshop, which you brought up, and then we have on the other side, we have like someone like me back in the day, where I had my own rule sets that I've written and published with my friend Mel, and we didn't have any miniatures, but we were focused totally on having nothing but a good rule set. And then there's, then in the balance, you have some that, you work your way towards the spectrum where, they've trying to have their own miniature line to go with their own rule set. And that's your goal in life, I think, as a company, is eventually trying to get to that point.
Where you have everything.
Yes. One-stop shopping, because to be honest with you, there's no money in rules.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple. Your bottom line is that once somebody buys a rule set, they have the rule set, and if you don't change the rule set, well, they're going someplace shopping to get the miniatures to play your game.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have the miniatures, they're going someplace else with their money. You got the money once, but that's it.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, you look at the market strategy of like Games Workshop, where they have all of the everything you need is right there. It's like they want every penny that you have going to them.
Yeah.
And even in their attitude is like, you cannot even go into the Games Workshop stores and play on their tables with anything but their miniatures. They don't let you go. So that's their whole strategies is from basically kind of like cradle to grave. We have every dime that comes through that you have. If you want, we got it.
So right? I'd like to interject for a second, just because you bring up a really good point. I realize this is still your response, but you bring the point up that there's no money in rules as compared to miniatures. And I really think at face value, that's right. Like, I think like from the size and volume of the business, like that's the understood concept, is that like you can make, not only is it repeat business, like you said, but even just the price. I mean, like in some cases you can sell one miniature for the price of all the rules. Like, in many cases, like if you use Games Workshop as an example. However, just from the price piece, making the miniatures is a lot more expensive than making the rules. So if you take this big pie, like that's all of the price to do this business, and if you say that this is everything, if you're only doing the rules and this is just cost, then like you're probably going down like all the way to like to here, like of like your cost of like what you're needing to do this. I mean, like there's the printing cost and there's the cost, you know, write it in the same way there's like designers to sculpt and things like that. But actual you know, the creation and the production and distribution and everything of all those miniatures and then all the sculptors and things. I think there's that component. So there's a bit of a, I do agree with you that like in the end, you're going to get a much larger revenue stream business with like much bigger amounts of money you're dealing with when you have it all and you have the miniature side. But I do also wonder, like, it's almost like in some ways a different business when you just focus on the rules, because like you're taking all that physical aspect out of it, right? Of like producing all of those molds and having all of those just like manufacturing streams, you know, which I think would be really expensive. I don't know. Yeah. I just thought I'd throw that in there because we can always say that, like, yeah, the money's in the miniatures, but also all the cost is in the miniatures too, right? And then there are businesses that only sell rules, and they seem to be doing well. You know, like they seem to be successful. Some of them.
Yeah. When it comes to production of your rule systems, the biggest expense is the printing cost, is to get it printed one way or the other. You can go the real cheap route of you get it printed on already pre-hole punched, 3-hole punched paper, and then they can just put it in a 3-ring binder if they want to and go that route. Mm-hmm. Or you can go the basic cost. As you go up in the quality of your printing, like you just had the Saga come out and they had that nice kind of glossy stock paper that they have compared to the previous edition.
Yeah.
And they put some money into their printing, plain and simple. And it's like the first one I explained is like, it may cost, let's say it's a 100-page rule book. It may cost you $5 to print that. Let's say it costs, you're selling it for $30. It may cost you $5 in manufacturing costs to have that printed up. And then you can, if you have a shrink wrap machine, you just shrink wrap it and then send it off to your customer, and they put the expense out and put it into a binder themselves. All right.
Yeah.
Or you could spend $2 and put it into so now you're up to like say $7 of your cost, and then you put it yourself and then you ship it that way. Yeah. And make the customer pay the shipping costs.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you have a distributor, you may end up, let's say, as a distributor will want to buy that from you at, let's say, 50% cost. All right. So your profit margin just went from, let's say you had 25%, and then they went, so you're not going to have like 25% profit margin through a distributor that the company is making to have that distributed for you to different stores. So then they can turn around and then charge it to a store, and then they'll get their 10-20%.
Yeah, everybody gets a little bit as it goes down the line.
And then the actual store might, you know, that's one thing everybody's like, well, what? The store discount everything. Well, they're have to buy it from somebody else too to sell it. And their profit margin might be 15-20% if they're lucky.
Yeah.
And that's why you see a lot of these game stores or sell comics and magic cards and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's where they make their money.
Right.
And they don't make a lot of money off the games in the shops. Just plain and simple.
Well, GW, as you know, is always, unless it's changed recently because a lot's changing, but GW has always said that they're a miniature company first.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
And I would say, to me, if you really like the stuff they're doing right now, that's great. And there's a lot of games that they're doing that I'm not playing. Hearing a lot of good things about Shadespire, but I would say that now more than ever, I always am impressed with the miniatures they're putting out. Like they're constantly upping their game all the time. Like, and their miniatures are amazing, but like I enjoy Age of Sigmar, playing it for what it is. But to be honest, I don't think that their rules are like light years ahead of what they were.
Yeah. And from a individual that's written rules, I look at that as, okay, you had, let's say, Age of Sigmar, which they brought on after they put the 45 to the head of the customers and killed off the fantasy battles. And it's like you created a game that any 5-6-year-old can play.
Mm.
And that's how I feel about it, is like you dumb down your game so much that any 5 or 6-year-old can play without having to read too much into it.
So
it's all there.
So within this topic, like, because I really hope that Adeptus Titanicus is amazing, and I hear good things about it. Like, I'm hoping for really good things. Like, I hear good things about Shadespire. I hear good things, but within the confines of this topic, we've got a company that we both said like has the capability of doing it all. But I would still say that where they're leaps and bounds ahead and always doing really well in the miniatures, that's the focus even today. Like, yeah, and that actually, they're not a rules company first, and I think that's reflected in the game. Like when you say that's reflected in the game, like beautiful miniatures on the table, but like, and the rules may not be bad, but for a company of its size and the miniatures as amazing as they are the rules that much better than the competition in many cases?
There's plenty of companies out there that produced and make rules that are just gorgeous.
Yeah.
That are hands down better than anything Games Workshop puts out. And the thing that drives so many people nuts with Games Workshop, even when they were producing decent rules, was that the ambiguity in it was horrible. Is that it's like, well, what do you mean by that? There's no explanation. There's no why does that work that way?
Yeah.
You could have 10 people read that rule and go, and you might end up with 10 different explanations of what the rules are.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you. And I know that they've always often been not considered the best for competitive gaming for that reason, like typically the games. And maybe that'll change with some of the newer games that are coming out. You know, I just finished reading Mordheim, and I have to say, like, I realize I'm kind of like, I've said this on a recent video that I'm actually late to the show on this. You know, I feel like me reading Mordheim and speaking to the audience out there on the web, having just read it now, like completely through for the first time, I just, you know, I realize I'm new to this, but my observation after playing a lot of games and having read that book from a while ago, whether I look at the miniatures from Mordheim or whether I look at the game, I mean, like, that's a real sweet spot in my mind. Like, I really was impressed with the rule system. I was really impressed with the content within the book, like the campaign, giving you your factions within the book, giving you a campaign, you know, it just giving you a system of trade and like a system of advancement that's pretty robust. I mean, even for a campaign system, it's actually pretty robust. I thought, like, I looked at this and I looked at the quality of the book, and then I look at the miniatures, which I love, and I thought, wow, this is such a sweet spot. Like, you know, between both, but the rules and the miniatures are gorgeous. Really, honestly, I went out and I, luckily I sent, there's a little local trading group on Facebook that I'm a part of. And I just sent a little text out there. Anybody got a really good condition Mordheim book? Cause I have it on my iPad, and within an hour I've set up a purchase where I've got like a mint condition Mordheim text that I'm picking up this weekend from somebody. And because I was just like, I got to have my hands on this actual hard copy after reading this. It's just amazing.
Yeah. And that's from Mordheim. That version, are you talking one from the 90s?
It would be I think so. I think so. Like, did they put out more than one version? I know there's a new living rule book on the web, but I thought there was just one book.
I think it was the original came out in, was it the late 90s, somewhere in there? And then it might have had some different variants along the way, but you're looking back to when you had like the Rick Priestley's and
Rick Priestley and actually the Bolt Action Alessio are both on the cover. They're both on the cover.
Yes, and you're talking about two individuals that were good at writing rules.
Yeah,
and they, as the company has gone away from that, they've simplicity. You know, like they said, we're just a miniature company now that has a set of rules for our miniatures. And that's kind of like and a sad statement in a way, is that they could have continued. Yeah, you have, I like to look at it, they're missing something along the lines of where, you remember how if you got a rule book, like let's bring up Battletech for example, you have the very basic core rule book or section, and then you start adding on layers and layers and layers and layers and layers of more advanced rules. And that's where I think Games Workshop is missing the point, because they don't want it to have to me, it seems like they're not wanting to put the effort into having anybody really put much effort into rules anymore.
Well, you know, I was funny. I was seeing another topic come out of this, because honestly, in a lot of ways, we're talking about the friction between companies choosing to focus on miniatures versus rules and where they start out and where they go to. But you could almost argue that in the world of video games and the world of Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh cards and the world of gaming and how much you want to invest to sit down to play a game, you can almost argue that even miniature games, there's a business model of moving away from complexity to try to bring in new players. And I do think that's a different topic than what we have tonight, but it's actually a valid point. Like, it's a really valid point that might be just the situation in some cases. That I'm almost kind of convinced that there are certain rule books that just wouldn't be written today anymore. You know, like even if they wanted to, like they would never choose to. And I was talking a little bit about that in Saga video too. There's less and less we're seeing books that are all in one, like giving you your factions, giving you your rules, giving you your scenarios, like everything in one. There you go, handing it to you. It's happening less and less. I mean, I think some people are still doing it, but people are moving away from it, or companies, I should say. But, you know, like, I feel like I'm a broken record because I always bring up Studio Tomahawk because I'm kind of a fanboy, and like two of my favorite games are from them, and arguably my favorites. Like Musty and Tomahawk's arguably my favorite game. I see a company like they're my example of a company because they're my favorites, where they focus on the rules, and I love miniatures, and I'm more of a hobbyist than a gamer. And so, like, in the end of the day, like, I want to spend more of my time painting, and I like the miniatures more. But when it comes to choosing my companies for my rule sets, for whatever reason, the one that's my favorite is one that doesn't sell miniatures, which is kind of funny. You know, even though, like, the miniatures are the most important thing to me, they are. Like, but hands down, the painting and the miniatures are the most important thing to me. Like, without a doubt. Like, you know, I need to have a good game, like, to really enjoy it, but I'm more focused on the miniatures. But then, like, my favorite company is one that actually focuses on the rules. And so I find that an interesting dichotomy.
In a nutshell, you explained a lot right with your statement there, is that when it comes to hobbying, the miniatures are where it is, because you could spend hours painting, losing yourself, shutting the world out, because you're sitting at your table. I spend a lot of time at this desk every day, and when we're done with tonight's stream, probably whenever we're done, I'm going to get back over here and probably put another hour or two at my desk and just like flip the switch and let the world just go away.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about hobbying, and that's the nice thing about miniatures, is you can sit there and paint and just keep going with that. And which, you know, is to me is a stress reliever. But when you're also talking about rules, there's something to on a level that you want something that challenges you. For one, I look at rules as like, if I can read the rules in 5 minutes, you know, okay. And in some ways, I guess chess could be, you can read the rules of chess in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But it takes a lifetime to master, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. But certain tactical games, you want some complexity. Yeah. Because chess is very strategic, but there's a tactical aspect to wargaming that you don't want missing too.
Yeah. And there's, you know, when I look at a rule set, I want something that's like, all right, Does it check my, can this feel like I'm being thrown onto the battlefield? Is this giving me the feeling that I am there? Is it real?
Mm-hmm.
Or is I just pushing around little plastic guys and just just throw some dice, yeah, whatever. And then at the end, just like, oh, I think I won. Only reason I won because you rolled a couple ones, okay, that sucks to be you. Or is it that I won because I really did something tactical and I got a flank and I pinned you down, to go like to say, talking about bolt action or something, is that I did something really tactical to put you in a hard spot that you could not get yourself out of.
Yeah.
And I maneuvered my guys. It's just like kind of like chess in a way. Are you maneuvering your pieces that you're suddenly folks like, hey, look at the shiny goldfish over here. You're not paying attention to what's going over here.
Yeah.
Type of deal.
And I would say musket and tomahawks. I'm just going to talk. I've been talking a lot about Saga because lately, and I'll just use musket and tomahawks as an example. I find it gives me that, like the tactical piece where I feel like I'm coming up with plans that are tactical. But then also I would add to your point that I agree with, that you want something challenging. I would add to that and say I also want something inspiring. And for me, musket and tomahawks, I think of the scenario generator and I think of how I can roll a die to actually change the weather, and that the weather will then change certain aspects of the game. I can think about, just various aspects to the game, whether you're using boats and like how that affects things. And just, there's just so much in the book that I find inspiring due to the narrative creation and then how that narrative adjusts the rules. And so for me, those are things that are actually really important too. Like that's kind of combined with the challenge, the tactical challenge of the game. When we're at a point where we're not looking for like a faster sort of like beer and pretzel sort of style game, because like I like that too. Like I like to be able to play fast games too that are fun, just fun and fast and just a social kind of thing. That can be fun as well. But it may not fill that niche for the, like what we're talking about here in some instances.
Yeah. From what I've seen of your channel and a little bit of other things like with musket and tomahawks, where I could see where with a die roll where the weather, it's pouring rain and you're having an engagement in a wooded forest where everything is wet, your powder is wet, your muskets don't work. So now you are down to your tomahawk or your bayonet. And it is a old-fashioned hack and slash game then.
And to raise up the ante, I mean, there's an aspect to change the weather for the day in musket and tomahawks, but then you have your random events tables, and it actually changes things on a dime. And so like you can play where you have your random events, and it literally will change what's going on in the game at that moment. So much so that there's like the one that came up a couple of times that my opponents and I was always laugh about, because it says, a sympathetic farmer to your opponent in the field takes a pot shot at you. And literally you're rolling the die for this farmer trying to hit you that's like popping up out of nowhere that you didn't expect. Those are the kind of things that they don't come up in like more simple systems, like that are just there to kind of create a skirmish, like a simple skirmish engagement. And what I really love, like about musket and tomahawks.
Yeah. So when you're looking at rule systems, so if you have a company and they're spending all their time is writing a set of rules, that's, be honest with you, you get a couple individuals and they sit down and they spend hours and hours and hours designing a set of rules. That's a labor of love.
Yeah, and play testing.
Yeah. Like Two Fat Lardies, they have their system. They put a lot of time and effort into that system to make it and try to make it as realistic as possible.
Yeah.
Without making it overly complicated.
Yeah.
In a way. And there's some ways I think they could add a little bit more to it, but that's going to take more time upon their part. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they want to do that, expand things out or not. But that's the thing about a small company that has just a set of rules. They are trying to give you something that will immerse you into that event or that time period. And where a large conglomerate company that's on the other side, it's like, oh, that's just the miniatures. Everybody just wants our miniatures, so that we'll just give you some rules that you can play. And in a way, it's kind of like, I look at Games Workshop in a way as like a gateway drug.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it's like, hey, check this out, and it's like, here, we'll give you this and this, and then now they're making all the rules kind of basically free, that you just, without little expense, to get you on the initial crack pipe. But you're going to end up with individuals eventually. Why is there such a big turnover with that company? People will play it for a while and get disenfranchised.
Yeah.
Wow.
Although the question is, there's temporary turnover, right? But like, honestly, like, we're both two guys here that you're still playing it. You said you weren't going to, but you were back within less than a year. And then I actually am not playing. I'm playing AOS, here and there. But even my break from 40K, like, I'm planning on getting Adeptus Titanicus, which is in the 40K setting. Yeah. So like, neither one of us like have been able to get away. And I love the old Hammer stuff. And so there's a lot of GW that I love. And honestly, I wouldn't wish anything bad to them. I want them to be successful. Like, I want them to do well, and I want to actually, that thing that I grew to love over time, to be something I can still coming back to, So even though I may not feel like great about one particular thing, there are a lot of people that leave, but there are a lot more people that always come back, in my opinion.
Yeah, we get disenfranchised. This last event where they changed they went from 7th to 8th edition. I thought 8th or 7th edition was the best edition that they had ever put out. And there's other individuals that say, what's the worst that they ever done? And it's like, okay, I played since Rogue Trader. It's gotten better, look more. And then I've looked at like 8th edition has gone. It's like, okay. I'm still on the fence. I'm not really feeling it. It's just, I can be honest with you. I look at it and it's just that, that feeling you get when you have a system and you go, I just want to play it every day I can. I don't have that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, but but there are systems, there's games out here where, let's say BattleTech. I could play a game of BattleTech every day if I could. Dystopian.
Would you consider them a miniature company?
No, they're not. They're a game company.
That's right. And so the other thing that's funny though is I still feel that the companies that kind of call themselves a game company first at times may have an edge on the game itself, which isn't really rocket science to make that conclusion, I guess. But what I would say is, even though I'm not playing these two games, I'll throw out two games that I think have hit a sweet spot and that are current games that I don't play. One's Infinity. I think that Infinity has a very good rule set, and it's actually has a lot of unique aspects to it, but they also have beautiful miniatures, and nobody would accuse Corvus Belli of not being a miniature company, in my opinion. And so that's a company there that has been able to hit both areas really well, in my opinion. And then another one I would say is Drop Zone, Hawk Wargames. Now, I know they've been bought. I know it's not Hawk Wargames. Like, it doesn't. I don't know if they're still called Hawk Wargames or if they're owned by the other company. But there's a distribution company, a retailer, Wayland Games. Aren't they the ones that bought Hawk Wargames?
They bought Dystopian Wars.
No. Maybe
Spartan Games.
Okay. Maybe either it was TT Combat or maybe somebody could put in the comments when the videos comes up. But I thought it was either Wayland Games or TT Combat had bought Hawk War Games. But I know they've been purchased, and I know that the gentleman that started the game has stayed on and is actually still working on the game with the company. But I always use him as an
Dave Lewis.
Yeah. I always use him as an example when I heard his story as someone that really put a lot of effort into both the miniatures and the rules, because like he was basically started out as a one-man show, and he actually did both the miniatures and the rules. And I don't I think for what you're looking at, I mean, I don't. Some of the miniatures are really beautiful for, you know, like what they represent at that scale. They're excellent and they're really detailed. They're really nice. And I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I think they're actually quite nice. But I also think the rules seem to be pretty good too. Like I looked at it and it looks to be good. You know, the rules seem to be good. And I've not played it much, you know, but I would use them as an example where, you know, they started small, you know, it was just a one-man show, but he kind of did a bit of a 360 production there. You know what I mean? Like both the miniatures and the rules were quite good.
One nice thing I have to say about what Dave did was that he was able to design his own miniatures, and he did it at a scale that works really good. It was that, I think they're what, 10 mil or something like that. And when you can design your own miniatures in, let's say 10 mil or 15 mil, and you're able to, let me tell you, your expenditures get really small when you go smaller.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when you think about it, how many little pewter miniatures can you make for this one versus this one? You know?
Yeah, yeah.
And you can put out, for the same cost, a whole bag. You know, you're starting to put out whole units and stuff.
Right.
And with today's day and age, I've talked to my daughter about it, you know, several times, and she was working on her, you know, she's an engineer and she has, you know, her experience working with CAD. And it's like, and she's like, well, how did they make that? And I was like, they use a computer. Everything nowadays is made on a computer using CAD.
Right.
And she was like, well, I could probably do that. And I said, yeah, you probably could. And you could probably make some good money on the side doing that kind of stuff. And that's where, if you have two individuals, one guy's really good at writing rules, the other guy's good on with a computer and designing miniatures, you get the two of them together, you can have a nice company at a very nice entry level.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You're talking less than $5,000, and you got, you know, you can be putting out stuff that people are just clamoring on, and you can't keep up with it. And that's kind of like what happened to Dave, is that suddenly, I don't think he was expecting that kind of outpours, like, whoa. Because when I talked to him, you know, I talked to him several times at Gen Con over the years when he came over, and he was like, no, I wasn't expecting that. It's like I put this out, and next thing you know, everybody's like, that's the game. That's the game. You know,
well,
everybody was jumping.
Is it fair to say that it really filled a niche that
a niche,
Epic
yes.
left? When Epic left, like, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah.
Is it fair to say, like, because Epic looked awesome too. Like, it's a game I hadn't played, but I was looking into it, but it seemed like that really. It seemed like it did it before Frostgrave. I would say it did it first, but it seemed like Frostgrave's success filling the niche of the absence of Mordheim, would be comparable to Drop Zone's success filling the gap of Epic.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
You stepped in at the right time.
Yeah.
Because you know, when Games Workshop was supporting Epic, and I remember, it was even up to at least 2010, 2012, somewhere in there, you could still buy the Epic stuff off their website. You know, they weren't really pushing it.
Right.
But you could still go on and go click and buy yourself an entire army for, $75.
Yeah.
And I bet Nick over there, you know, Idic Beer, you know, he's always wanted some Necrons, a little for Epic scale. Well, he could have had a lot of Epic.
So I got a question for you.
What's that?
We're 1 minute. It's 7:59 my time, probably 8:59 yours. So I'm completely dry here with my Aberylure that I have here. How are you doing?
I'm jealous.
Did you have a glass tonight? Oh, I was wondering, like, is that iced tea? Because I haven't seen you have a sip tonight at all.
Because you've been so busy talking.
You get so inspired. See, nothing you or I say makes me forget about what I have in front of me. There you go. Well, all right.
This is tonight's drink. I was opened up. I've been drinking my Maker's Mark.
Okay.
And For me, well, there was. It started off. It had a couple big ice cubes in it because I always drink ice in my bourbon.
Okay.
And my ice is melted in the last hour and 15 minutes or so. It's changed its texture a little bit because it's now watered down.
That's right.
But yeah, I just one little slide story. You know, when I was down in stationed down at Fort Knox, Kentucky, I've been to Maker's Mark a few times.
Nice. When they had their tasting room?
Yes. I have the bottle over there on the on display in front of my Ryan Sandberg drawing that done up. And right in front of it is a bottle of Maker's Mark that I hand dipped myself.
And so that imbues a lot of customer loyalty right there.
Yes, it does.
All right. Well, I think you're the host tonight, but I think that maybe we are actually approaching the end of the show.
And we never even got through even half of our first topic.
That's right. That's right. But I thought it was an interesting discussion. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I could go on and on about what's a lot of stuff that goes on in the backfield that, you know, the average customer doesn't ever see. Mm-hmm. And maybe another night we could talk about that. Maybe I'll even break out some of the stuff that I've done over the past and show you.
Maybe we'll do a part 2 and we'll call it the inner workings of the miniatures company.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where I've kind of like let my company kind of just go, you know, slide away, fade into the sunset kind of thing.
Yeah.
At one time, it was me and my partner, we were kind of like the it gang back in the 90s. There was a lot of people that were asking to come to cons. We were going to cons here, there, and everywhere.
For your rule sets?
Yes.
Yep. Awesome. Well, we'll have to talk about that one time. That'll have to be a topic for sure. Yeah. I'd be interested to hear it.
And maybe one of those days I might send you a copy.
There you go. All right.
All right.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening.
Just put it out as we put every time, is if anybody wants to come on the show and join us for an hour of sitting around and talking about games and adult beverages. Yes, we're adults. We talk about adult beverages. So if you want to come join us, just drop a line to either Palmer or I. You know, if you know our channels, just send us a message and join us for a show. We do this about every 2 weeks, and you could be for a night a Musty Wargamer.
That's right.
Yeah.
So. All right. See you, everybody.
All right, everybody. We'll talk to you later. You have a good one. We'll see you in the command bunker later.